So we've placed the last half hour, and we still have 25 minutes of that. Amazing. Thank you all for great work during the day. The last bit of time today to just have a general discussion and summary. And to give that a little bit of structure, I would like to propose a couple of questions for you to think about responding to with comments. And I'll give you my answers to those questions as well with a few minutes. So question one, based on what we have heard throughout the day, can you sum up a few key points, some of the distilled wisdom? What is it that we know that we've heard that would represent something of a consensus or common view, common understanding? And the second question is, what have we not given enough attention to? Allowing for the fact that there are two important sessions tomorrow that we will address, so take that into account. But for the things that we've tried to cover today, what have we failed to raise? Or even if we've raised it, what have we not given enough attention to? So let me give you a few thoughts about my answers to those questions while you're pondering your own. First, some takeaways. I thought it was terrific to see the coherence around the level of understanding of the degree to which buildings protect us from particles of outdoor origin. And, you know, if I was to summarize the main takeaways there, protection not so good for PM 2.5, protection pretty good for ultrafine particles, and maybe even better for coarse PM. And we even know about species. So for nitrate, surprisingly good protection of buildings, maybe not widely appreciated yet for protecting us against outdoor nitrate. And for organic carbon, I think the story there is not so much about the protection from outdoors, but the fact that indoor sources are strong contributors to our organic carbon particle experience. A second point, maybe this is one that we didn't talk enough about yet, and that is the potential. We're living in a system, or we're concerned about a system that is richly complex, and the nuances matter, and we are data poor, and information technology creates absolutely enormous data potential for the future. How can we begin to think about harnessing that potential? The Internet of Things applied to indoor particulate matter and its associated health risks. Third, we talked about a lot, but I just want to come back and highlight again because it's so important, the significance of variability in this system. And let me highlight it in this particular way, that the choices, the conditions, the circumstances in individual buildings, to the extent that there are health effects associated with indoor particulate matter, what happens in individual buildings controls the exposures that occur in that building and therefore controls the circumstances. We do have a very big problem, even if the central tendency is okay, if there's huge variability about that central tendency. Maybe the example that makes it easy to understand this is carbon monoxide poisoning risk. Of course, it's not a particulate matter problem, but you die if you are exposed to excessive carbon monoxide poisoning in your home. And it doesn't matter if we've done a great job in reducing automotive emissions of carbon monoxide and we meet the national air quality standard across the country, there's still people who are dying from this, and it has to do with variability in the system. We're dealing with 100 million dwellings in the United States. I don't know what the proper number is, tens of millions of commercial spaces, and each one has its own attributes, even if the governing principles are common. And then that brings me to the last point, which is the absolutely important role of behavior. Again, touched upon a little bit in some of the talks today, but a lot of what determines what happens with respect to particulate matter in indoor environments is a consequence of the behavior of the people who occupy those spaces, which creates a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity. I mean, this is maybe leading somewhat into tomorrow's session, and it's an area that I don't know enough about to say anything more. So that's a good place for me to stop and to invite comments and your own responses. And you can not answer my questions if you choose to.
I will try, Bill. I just want to say thank you so much for a lot of really great information today, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And thank you, Laura, for inviting me up. I think it was well worth expending some of the limited travel budget funds for my branch to come. I think what I have is regarding a phrase, a term you used a moment ago, Bill, which was distilled, and it's a consideration, and it's something probably you already have in the works, but just want to reiterate the importance, and that is how the information does get distilled. A lot of things, as a mechanical engineer, environmental engineer, I could understand today, but there's also a lot of things that just went, you know, I felt, you know, dumb at times, and if I felt dumb, I'm going to take this back to my bosses, and they're going to feel even, oh, wait a minute, the camera's going, so never mind. So, no, they will be much more appreciative if this is distilled in such a way that will be valued to them in the process of trying to decide with very limited research dollars now and people, you know, resources across the board in EPA's Office of Research. If we can distill this in such a way that it will be useful to them in making decisions about where future resources will go, because it is a very, very tight process now. It's a long-term process, and it's a very tight process to compete for funds and resources of people and facilities within the EPA's research program. And the more we can turn this into a language that they will clearly see, what is it, what is the value of it, how can I make this happen right away for, you know, great return on investment, the better off I think we'll be, at least for EPA's perspective, in ensuring that not only do we have maybe internal funds to do research, but also have those grant funds made available for doing, you know, providing out to academia and NGOs and other organizations as we do. So, oh, and just a quick comment, if I may, on the issue, one that always gets to me on these. I heard terms today used like high cost, things being high cost, and I know the meaning of that was meaning like high initial cost, not necessarily life cycle cost. And the discussion we just had about the $250, I look so forward to the day, it may not be before I retire, but maybe before hopefully I die, that we are able to bring to the table more information in such a way that we're not using terms like it's high cost, unless they're saying it, you know, in a very contextual way. And we're able to answer questions like the 250 better because we have a better understanding. What are the real comprehensive impacts of what we all try and work on here in our life's careers? What are the comprehensive impacts of these things that we're suggesting on a life cycle basis? You know, it's not just the first cost. In other words, what is the value of, if I were to spend that $250 on air filter, really, how does that prevent me maybe later on from having a, you know, some disease, acute or chronic? How does it help the well-being of my family in some way? You know, what is the dollar value of those things that today we don't do as well as say the energy people do by holding up one light bulb and saying this one takes this much and this one takes, you know, 10 times less and has a lifetime of this amount and, you know, uses only this many watts and whatever and costs this much and whatever. I look for the day that we could do very similarly. We can say, you do this and look, it's going to have all these values to you someday.
So about 11 years ago, I wrote a couple articles about the city of Hong Kong, who is, I'm not sure if they're still the only ones, but they were back then. They actually had an...
Sorry to interrupt you, but can you introduce yourself?
I'm Steve Welty with Green Clean Air. I'm here locally. So what they have in Hong Kong is a indoor air quality rating system. And so if you walk into a building in Hong Kong that is participating in this, you can have a building rating and you'll know generally what the quality of the air is in that building. And so one of the things that I've kind of thrown out, and we talked about it actually this was in 2005, and then 2009, the Surgeon General had a thing at NIH, and I kind of put it out there, and I'm going to now put it out again, that you know, what is a way that we can kind of distill down, based on what Bob is kind of saying, what is the quality of the air in a building? whether it's a commercial building, whether it's a sports arena, whether it's a home. So that way people can say, okay, here are a set of parameters, and there's all these different ones, that we can say, wow, the air is good, the excellent, supreme. And so what I'd like to throw out to the EPA would be, looking at some kind of way that maybe we could have that here in the United States.
So this is Brett Singer again, and I appreciate the comment and the concept of rating buildings for indoor air quality, but I think one of the points that came up throughout the day was you have to be very careful about doing that, because the indoor air quality is going to vary a lot over time depending on how the building's being operated and what the people inside the building are doing. So I don't think it's as simple as saying, what's the indoor air quality in this building? What I think you can do, and I'm guessing this is what you were alluding to, is you can rate a building for its robustness in providing good indoor air quality. So, for example, a building that has a good ventilation system, that has filtration that's operating with some automatic filtration, a building that has good bathroom exhaust, a building that's just generally well laid out. That's a building that may get a higher rating because it's more likely more of the time to have good indoor air quality. But I think it's important to not lose sight of the fact that the temporal variation is very important, and you can't come in at one time and measure the indoor air quality. It's a question we get a lot. How do I measure the indoor air quality of my building? And the reality is you're much better focusing on the structural factors that are going to lead to better indoor air quality than you are in measuring the indoor air quality at any one time.
Glenn, no, Barb?
I'm not sure I should open my mouth. Barb Turpin. And I guess we haven't talked that much about consumer products today, and I do think that people trust that when they buy things and use them pretty much according to the directions, that they're safe, and I doubt that that's true. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, please, Bill.
Can I ask I'd like to ask a question about sources that wasn't addressed today. So I know that cooking is going to kill me. I know that vacuuming is going to kill me. I know that burning candles is going to kill me. What about doing the laundry? I understand if my dryer is vented correctly, it shouldn't be that big a deal. But do we have data on gas and electric dryers and their output?
There's one published paper that focused on dryer-based generation of ultrafine particles. Lance Wallace was the author. My group ran a indoor ultrafine study, 7 homes. It was deeper than broad in Northern California. And given Lance's observation, we went and looked and couldn't find that the dryers in the homes that we studied contributed to the ultrafine particle burden there. Barb, I think, somebody mentioned that there were enzymes in the detergent that, oh, sorry, it was Lynn. Sorry, it's the end of the day. And you're both Caltechers at one point or another. The enzymes that are in detergents show up in the lint filter, and so one might assume that some part of those enzymes don't get consumed and end up on the clothing fabric, and then we might get exposed to them. So, there are a lot of ways to die. You can pick your preference. Jeff.
I was thinking about the things we did. One of the things we didn't address today, and what came up for me is to think of it in terms of, we do know a lot about how to intervene in some of these things, even if it's more of a prophylactic effort and we don't understand all the mechanisms. The question that came up for me is, well, when are the opportunities for intervening? Because $250 is a lot if I'm taking it out of my own home's operation and maintenance budget. But if I'm planning a renovation, it's not. So thinking about that the best time to intervene is when a building is in design. And it's sad when I go to a new building that has horrible problems that could have easily been avoided in design and construction. Another time is when a gut rehab is occurring. I can do a lot in a gut rehab. And another time is when I'm doing an addition or something like that. And that's thinking of it in terms of low-rise, single-family kinds of buildings. If I think in terms of multifamily buildings, they get refinanced every 10 or 12, 15 years. And the banks sometimes put requirements like, you know what, you have to fix the pool in the basement. You have to fix the leaking windows or we're not going to give you the money to refinance. And so that's a time when we can make interventions. And we can make interventions in those buildings. There is an O&M budget and designated trained individuals to conduct it. So that's another place in the O&M budget. Things can happen there. And during energy efficient retrofits are another time when we can make interventions. And so I'm thinking that that's an important way for us, because the people who are going to change this are those people who are doing those things. So we need to turn this inside out, I think, and tell them, yeah, given your schedule of doing things, this is what we would like you to do.
Do you want Jeff to comment?
I'll do this very briefly because it's on dryers. Two comments is, one is that there is some emerging evidence that dryers are a good place to transfer things like SVOCs, the closed pickup from the indoor environment, into a route of exposure because of the temperatures and so on. And there is another paper that just came out earlier this year on exposures to lint from dryers and some of the things that come with that. But the bigger point I wanted to make about dryers was actually getting to something that someone asked about zero energy buildings. And we've talked about tightening up the envelope to make as a good way of protecting yourself from outdoor particles. A dryer vents a very high volume flow rate of air. And if you have a tight envelope, you're all of a sudden causing potentially quite serious problems in terms of depressurizing and pulling in contaminants from backdrafting combustion appliances, that sort of thing. And so I think that the bigger picture issue is that a building is a system, and we might do one thing to mitigate exposure to indoor particles, and there might be other effects. And so looking at things from a systemic point of view is probably important.
Howard, were you about to comment?
I just wanted to clarify that the problems with the dryer occur even if it's vented outdoors because of the backdrafting, right?
I would say that the evidence is emerging, but yes.
Brett? Oh, sorry. Let's let Lynn go. You haven't spoken in a while.
Lynn Hildeman, when it's so exciting to be in a room with people who really know the health end of things and people like me who really are figuring out so much about the particle end of things. I feel like there's a gap we haven't quite bridged. And it's an important gap in terms of Brent's comments earlier about how do you convince the public whether this particular emission source is bad or not. So that's toxicity, right? If is a certain source of particles, is it like belly button lint where you don't need to worry about it? Or is it as nasty as cigarettes, where I think already we've done a good job of convincing the public that cigarette smoke is really bad and should be avoided. Certainly when we're focusing on, improving the design and operation of buildings, that will be generally useful for many types of particles. But the part that is going to focus on convincing the public to worry more about certain sources, I think we really need to be able to tell them what the toxicity or risks are from different types of sources.
David, please.
I say maybe that's like the perfect lead-in for tomorrow morning, because I think that's kind of exactly where we're going to be going, is we're going to, at least in that first session, talk about cardiovascular health effects, reproductive health effects, and neurologic, as well as some of the respiratory as well. And we were tasked with trying to talk a little bit about what's been done with indoor, but even going to some of the ambient pollution and kind of using that as to a way to think about, well, what can we do? What kind of studies can we do? And I've been sitting here all day, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, so I'd say, okay, but how do I measure an exposure to get at that source that you're so interested in? And so I think that's a good topic to roll into tomorrow as we do it. And I know I'm going to get asked like 10 questions on this tomorrow. I'm giving myself all the card questions. But that'll be essentially what we're going to try to talk about, I think, a little bit is what could we do on the health side to study specific sources, and what kind of types of studies, what type of outcomes could be done to do that. So I think that's the perfect leading question.
Howard.
Yeah, I'd just say briefly that in terms of tobacco smoke and in terms of environmental tobacco smoke, there are a lot of epidemiology studies that show clinical endpoints, mostly heart attacks and things related to controlling those sources. We haven't gotten there yet for indoor air quality. We are going to hear about some biological marker studies that imply mechanisms, but not, I don't think we're going to hear a lot about indoor air and things that the government keeps track of.
Rich has been sitting here for a moment waiting, and Glenn will.
So Charlie was the only person today who talked about chemistry in the respiratory system, and I think, Bill, you asked about what I think was lacking today, or what we might want to talk more about, and it's chemistry in the breathing zone, near head chemistry in the respiratory system. I'm going to give you one example. A lot of foodstuffs have really high concentrations of terpene alcohols in them. Soda pops, chewing gum, breath mints, Listerine, all those things, right? To the extent to where the terpene alcohol concentrations on breath may be in the tens of parts per million as opposed to tens of parts per billion that you find indoors. So you can imagine if somebody inhales ozone while they are sucking on a breath mint or after they've chewed some gum, the chemistry is so fast, if you look at the sort of pseudo first order rate constant, the bimolecular rate constant times the terpenoid concentration, that you're going to just wipe out the ozone like that and perhaps get bursts of second organic aerosols going into your respiratory system. So there's this question of, is chewing gum or having a breath mint outdoors in Houston in the summertime protective from an ozone standpoint or bad for you because you're generating large amounts of second organic aerosols in your respiratory system? But I think the near head chemistry and the respiratory chemistry issue should bring in issues like that, is because there's a lot of stuff in our breathing zone and on our breath that can react with ozone as well.
Glenn?
I guess this is a more of a question, but is it worth taking that leap of faith that I think Charlie alluded to this, that the indoor particles of outdoor origin are basically responsible for the epidemiology associated with PM. I mean, we've talked a lot about the evidence, where is the evidence exactly, but how much does it really cost for us to control outdoor particulate matter? It's tremendous, tens of billions of dollars a year for very small incremental changes, when we could apply a very small fraction of that to just go ahead, create tax rebates, and retrofit buildings. I mean, what does that cost? I mean, Bill, I'm sure you've looked at this. What if we took that leap of faith? Would it really be a cost-effective leap of faith?
Yeah, there's certainly a number of cost-benefit analyses of better filtration and the sort of the benefits of the reduced adverse health effects versus the implementation costs, and that looks very good from a societal perspective. But what I haven't seen is a comparison of the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness of improving health through traditional outdoor PM mitigation approaches versus approaches that we can implement in buildings. Obviously, there's some examples. I mean, there's some cost effectiveness data on the California program to reduce indoor tobacco smoking and so forth. So when things are really low cost measures, you can get a behavioral change, and the cost effectiveness is obvious.
So we've hit this magic 5 o'clock time, and I had promised that we would finish by then. I just want to say that it's been a really stimulating day, and I want to thank again the committee who worked with me to put together the program, and also especially the institute staff, or the NA, whatever you guys are called for short now, staff, David, Guru, and Anna, because of the terrific job you did to bring us all together and then to run this day so smoothly. And not least, the speakers who gave terrific presentations, took time out of their busy schedules to be with us during this time, and then, you know, everybody who's participated through the audience. It's been a terrific day. I'm looking forward to a fantastic finish tomorrow morning, and wish you a good evening. Thank you.